So to recollect, I just want to point out some of the strengths of this study. Throughout these different 15 countries, 4 continents, we use a validated 7-day fluid-specific record. There was therefore homogeneity in the methods and the data treatment, which allow for inter-country comparisons. We tried to collect as much as possible all fluid types. There are, of course, different limitations to the data that we have just seen. The samples were non-representative. There was not a statistical representative sample applied, so there is a potential for sampling bias. For children less than 12 years of age, there was parental reporting, and in all cases, this is self-reported data. There was no school surveys to further inform us what was happening in this important environment for children and adolescents. In the specific case of Brazil, there was only one city which was collected, Sao Paulo, which I should say, however, that it represents about 20% of the population in the country. We cannot derive any conclusion in terms of hydration because, as I mentioned before, there was no hydration marker collected in the samples. And lastly, we're looking at adequate intake and not RDAs. So in summary, let me just leave this as your take-home message. The median total fluid intake is less than the adequate intake for each country and gender. We found different important percentages of the population, both in children, adolescents, and adults, that were drinking less than the recommendation. The fluid types were very different by different countries, and I think that the data that we have really call for specific actions, very country-specific wise. About 23% of the overall sample drank less than 1 serving of water per day. 78% of the fluid consumptions take place at home, therefore the importance of teaching and practicing good fluid habits or drinking habits at home. Total fluid intake does take place both inside meals and a substantial proportion outside meals, and therefore, as Joan mentioned, the importance of a fluid-specific intake methodology. And lastly, there were no fluid sources at school in more than half the sample of children. So I just want to point some future perspectives that the research team has been thinking about, and certainly with your contribution, we may add up to this list at the end during the Q&A session. And to finish, I would like to mention that this information is publicly available and these different sources that you can see there. And I hope that you will consult both the published articles as well as the interactive map, which is the one that you can see on the mainframe, as well as other resources. Thank you so much for your attention.